All right. There we go. All right. So operating procedures. This is where we're going to get, this is some of the fun stuff, operating procedures. Next week, bring your coffee because all that regulatory stuff is dull and dry. But so now we're going with operating procedures for FM. So your FM will be your handheld, and that's going to be 2 meters and 70 centimeters for our purposes here today. VHF, UHF transceivers usually are the first radio for most technicians. A lot of technicians will have that radio in their hand, trying to figure out how to listen to it before they ever get their license. Some before they even start studying for their license. Your handheld VHF, UHF transceivers have a limited range. Now, the range is based on a few things. Did somebody say something? No. The range is based on a few things. The basic thing is line of sight. So there's a certain formula that you can use. It's like if I'm standing right here like this, and the receiver, the antenna is 5 feet 6 inches from the ground. That 5 feet 6 inches can be calculated out to tell us how far I'm likely to reach. But there's other things that are going to come into play. Such as topography, okay? You're not going to be able to go through buildings or through mountains. However, if you can get up on a mountain, that would greatly improve your range. So line of sight is what we're looking at right now. FM repeaters, one other thing actually, that'll probably come in down the line here. FM repeaters simultaneously retransmit signals we're talking about a repeater, simultaneously retransmits a signal on a different, it says channel, on a different frequency. Repeater, let's stick with channel, because if you're looking at GMRS, it is actually broke down into channels. Repeater, auxiliary, and space stations can automatically retransmit. VHF, UHF repeaters usually limited to line of sight as well, but repeaters are typically up on a tall pole or a tower, okay? So let's see, from here, it is that way, I believe, is the .37 repeater, 145.370 megahertz. It's on Broadcast Court over off of Clear Lake. Yes, Clear Lake. And if I remember right, that repeater is at 200 feet. I'd have to ask to be sure. N1 KSC, the KSC repeater, is farther from here, but it's up on top of the vehicle assembly building. So it's like 525 feet. So it's got a big footprint. They are limited to line of sight, although there are some that may have an internet connection, and that's a different type of system. What type of amateur station simultaneously retransmits the signal of another amateur radio station on a different channel or channels? Charlie, a repeater. So when you get your license is going to give you two things. It's going to give you the authority to transmit, and it also gives you authority to have a radio station. And the repeater is no different. The license for the repeater, the club has the license for the repeater, and the license is what authorizes the station and authorizes it to transmit. Yes? Okay. Let's see. What type of amateur station simultaneously retransmits a signal of another amateur? Okay, we already said that. Repeater. Okay. What types, there's an S there, of amateur radio stations can automatically retransmit the signals of other amateur radio stations. Repeaters, auxiliary, or space stations. That is correct. Repeaters can be linked for increased range. All linked repeaters retransmit received signals. SARnet, our local SARnet, and when I say local, I mean Florida. SARnet is a local analog repeater network, usually linked via the internet, but I do believe that SARnet here is linked by microwave. So if power goes down, they can still, it takes the power of the whatever's powering the modem at that point out of the picture, because everything goes by, and I think that's the way it is. It's been a while since I read that. DMR, DSTAR, and Fusion are popularly linked networks for digital voice, and those are linked over the internet. SARnet stands for State Amateur Radio Network, or Statewide Amateur Radio Network. So you talk, if you 444-650, I think it is the one here in Cocoa over by the FHP station. If you talk to that over that repeater, it doesn't just go to the local area, it goes to every repeater, every SARnet repeater in the state. They're all connected. That can get annoying, because you have somebody that gets in their car and they've got Vox set on their radio, and every time they start talking to their wife, you get to listen to him and his wife argue. So, yeah, usually somebody catches that and will find out which repeater it's on and then disable that repeater from the statewide. So, all right. Which of the following describes a linked repeater network? A network of repeaters in which signals received by one repeater are repeated by all the repeaters in the network. That is correct. Repeater use requires proper radio programming. You remember, as Milton approached, I sent out an email to let everybody know the storm is expected to pass and we should still have a class. I also gave information for the 3.7 repeater, and it was more alive just before and immediately after that storm than I've ever heard it. So it would have been a good time to be listening in. And I gave you the frequency, the downlink frequency, which is from the repeater to your radio of 145.37. And I pointed out that you can't transmit on it because you're not licensed yet. Greg could. Greg's got a novice license, so he could have. But the uplink frequency is 600 kilohertz difference, and I can't remember off the top of my head if it's positive or negative. I think it's negative. So 145.370 from the repeater to you, for you to the repeater, would be 145 or 144.770. So it'd be 600 kilohertz difference. You also have to have a PL tone, and I don't remember what the PL tone was, but I think I put it in the email. But when you get all that stuff programmed in correctly, then you can communicate through the repeater. So your radio, your radio must receive on the repeater's transmit frequency, and then you transmit on the repeater's receive frequency. The difference between the transmit and the receive frequencies is called offset. And that every radio that I've programmed, it does use the word offset. Sometimes for the PL tone, it's going to be listed a little bit differently. The typical offset for 2 meters is 600 kilohertz plus or minus, and the offset for 70 centimeter band is 5 megahertz. When you look at the 2 meter band, you've got 148 megahertz, 144 megahertz to 148 megahertz. So you've only got 4 megahertz of band there. So that's one reason why they keep that offset lower. When you look at your 70 centimeter band, you've got, I think it's 420 to 450. So you've got 30 megahertz difference. So there's room for a wider offset on that. And I'm sure there's other reasons why that offset is wider. What is a common repeater frequency offset for the 2 meter band? Bravo, plus or minus 600 kilohertz. Very good. What is a common repeater frequency offset for the 70 centimeter band? Alpha, plus or minus 5 megahertz. Repeater interference, distant transmissions, and this has happened here a couple of times that I've been told of. I've never experienced, but I've been told that there's been some interference from one up the coast. Repeater interference, distant transmissions or input frequency, continuous tone-coded squelch system, okay, CTCSS, continuous tone-coded squelch system, puts a subaudible tone, and this is like a key. Even though you might have the frequencies right, if you don't have the key, then it won't unlock the repeater. And that's what that is supposed to do. So the repeater that we've had some interference with, I think was in Daytona. Was it Daytona or Jacksonville? Both. But this tone is a subaudible tone is supposed to eliminate that. And you see it goes from 67 hertz, because it's subaudible, up to 257 hertz. Digital code squelch is something else. It's different. So when you're programming your Baofeng and it's offering you all these different types of codes, the CTCSS is the one that you're looking for. And you're only looking for the uplink, okay? There's no code for the downlink to your radio. We're not using that yet. I think they use that in Europe. What's that? It's differences between the way they're set up and the way we set up. And it's probably driven by whatever the rules are there for their use of amateur bands. What term describes the use of a subaudible tone transmitted along with normal voice audio to open the squelch of a receiver? Delta, CTCSS, cone-toted, continuous tone-coded squelch system. I can never remember it. Which of the following could be the reason you are unable to access a repeater you can hear? Let's see, improper transceiver offset. You're using the wrong CTCSS tone. You are using the wrong DCS code. In the case where there might be a DCS code. Very good. Repeater troubleshooting. Checking the input signal. Use reverse function to listen to the input frequency. And I've never quite figured this out yet. Bob? How does that work out? Okay. Okay. Everybody get that? So it requires a second radio? Okay, so you got a second radio that's going to be set. Okay, set it to the receive frequency of the repeater, which would be your transmit. All right. Okay. Distorted transmissions, speaking too loud or too close to the microphone, which we've already discussed. How is a VHF, UHF repeater's reverse function used? Charlie, to listen on a repeater's input frequency. Okay. What would cause your FM transmission audio to be distorted on voice peaks? Charlie, you are talking too loudly, or too close to the mic, or redirect across it instead of into it. So making a repeater contact, I brought a radio in, was it last week or a week before? I think it was last week. So what we demonstrated for y'all. So what you're going to do is you're going to give your call sign followed by monitoring or listening. This is if you are you're not calling out to someone specifically. So Bob would say, this is W3RDL monitoring, or Whiskey 3 Romeo Delta Lima monitoring. Yeah. Then if somebody wants to respond to that, they would give their call sign, or no, they would give the call sign they're calling. Okay, so if I wanted to, when Bob says this is W3RDL monitoring, and I decide I want to call him, I said W3RDL K4XLG. Okay, his call sign followed by my call sign. Replying on a repeater, caller's call sign followed by your call sign, same way. Okay. What is an appropriate way to call another station on a repeater if you know the other station's call sign? Bravo. Say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign. So for those who have a hard time remembering which order, when you talk to your friend, okay, say you call your friend up on the phone, you say, hey, Bob, this is Dan. Okay. You don't say, this is Dan, Bob. So anyway, which of the following indicates that a station is listening on a repeater and looking for a contact? Now, remember, we're talking about FM here, okay? Bravo, the station's call sign followed by the word monitoring. Okay, this is K4XLG monitoring.37. Very good. Okay, so the difference between duplex and simplex. Duplex is using a repeater. Okay, repeaters operate on different transmit and receive frequencies. That makes them duplex. Simplex transmissions, you're going to be speaking on and listening on the same frequency. That makes it simplex. And it's normally radio to radio, point to point. So when we did the demo here last week, when I spoke to, it was Steve, the president of IRARC, he told me, I did a radio check when I got here because I didn't know if I was going to be able to get out of the walls, not knowing the construction of the building. So I wanted to find out if I could talk to the repeater and then from inside here, or if we would have to step outside to do the demo. And Steve answered up when I was in here, and he told me, he said, I'll be listening all day. So when you're ready to do the demo, just give me a call. So, anyway, that was through the repeater. Okay, we had the assistance of the repeater between us. Simplex is going to be radio to radio. So transmitting and receiving on the same frequency prevents tying up repeater channels. So if you're close enough to talk to your buddy without the use of the repeater, then you should do that because it doesn't tie up the repeater. 2-meter national simplex calling frequency. Okay, so calling frequencies, this is a coast-to-coast recognized frequency that you can establish a contact on. Now, the proper protocol is that if you establish contact on air, you decide you want to chew a little bit, tell them, let's go down 5 or let's go up 5 or something like that and get off of the calling frequency. So your 2-meter national simplex calling frequency is 146.52. If any of you have ham radio in your car yet, a 2-meter ham radio in your car yet, most of them these days have 2 displays. And the top display, you'll be able to listen and talk. The bottom display, you're just monitoring. And if something comes across that bottom display that you want to talk on, then you have to switch. And there's usually a button to switch A and B. And at any rate, 146.52 is what I keep on my monitoring in my car. Sometimes it gets annoying because you get this guy, like I'm right here on a road going this way, and there's a guy over here on a road going this way, and this whole road is just at the fringe of what I can hear. So all I get is static. So sometimes you got to have a way to quickly turn it off, and I've got a setting called Receive Dual Watch set up on one of my soft keys, and I just press the soft key and it's off. It turns off that second frequency. Okay, so 70 centimeter national calling frequency is 446 megahertz. The thing you have to watch with 70 centimeters is that it is much more susceptible to interference from vegetation and precipitation. So within an urban setting, I'll call it an urban setting, within an urban setting, you're probably better off on 2 meters. But 70 centimeters is there. And it always makes me wonder why. Well, I know why. The reason why is because Jeepers don't want to take tests. They just want to go ride. And so they use GMRS because there's no test for that. But GMRS is in UHF. And where do you ride your Jeeps? In the woods. So you got all that interference there. And you still end up, even with a 20-watt radio, you still end up only being able to talk over about a half a mile. It would be much better if they would just go take the test, get a ham license, and use the 2 meters in their Jeep. So anyway, remember, 2 meters, 146.520, 70 centimeters, 446. What term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? Charlie, simplex. What are simplex channels designed or designated in the VHF UHF band plans? Let's see, why are simplex channels designated in the VHF UHF band plans? Alpha, so stations within range of each other can communicate without tying up a repeater. What is the national calling frequency for the 2 meter band? Simplex, Alpha 146.520, simplex calling frequency. Takeaways: repeaters, auxiliary, and space stations can automatically retransmit on another channel, can be linked to extend range. Frequency offset for 2 meters is plus or minus 600K. Frequency offset for 70 centimeters is plus or minus 5 megahertz. Most use subaudible, and I say most because I know I have heard of one that has no tone requirements. Most use subaudible tones, CTCSS to access. Unable to connect, check that you have the right offset, check that you have the right tone, check to make sure that you have the right DCS code, if that is a thing. FM repeater troubleshooting, use the reverse function to listen on the repeater's input frequency. Talking too loudly causes distortion on your voice peak. Making a repeater contact, say the station's call sign, your station's call sign, followed, making a call to somebody else on a repeater. Say the station you're calling first, then follow it up with your call sign. A listening station identifies with call sign and monitoring. And a lot of times when you hear people say their call sign and monitoring, they're not just listening. Sometimes they're looking for somebody to respond, anybody to respond. Simplex operation, transmitting and receiving on the same frequency, avoids tying up a repeater, 146.520 for 2 meters simplex calling frequency, and that's it. Any questions?